We will begin this session just a few moments late, but in the meantime, if you could silence your mobile devices and find your seats, we will prepare for a start. Thank you for joining us today. Our program will begin momentarily. Please join us in welcoming to the stage Kara Dickerson.
Good morning and welcome to day 2 of CES 2023. My name is Kara Dickerson. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Conferences for CTA. So hopefully you've now all had a chance to walk the show floor of CES, and you'll be very clear that there is no shortage of bold ideas on the exhibit floor. But it takes more than just a good idea to bring a business to life and help it thrive and grow. For most entrepreneurs, launching a startup successfully takes capital. And it's no secret that when it comes to funding, not all entrepreneurs have an equal shot. In fact, the most significant barrier facing underserved entrepreneurs is a lack of access to capital. And that's why I'm so thrilled to be kicking off a conversation with an incredible group of women who have firsthand experience in identifying opportunities to build and grow businesses in new sectors. And they're going to share their thoughts on why investing in diverse entrepreneurs can drive creative solutions to the world's biggest challenges. So to lead this morning's conversation, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Gore, co-founder and president of Hello Alice, a small business platform helping over 1 million small businesses achieve equitable access to capital. Elizabeth personally advises the growth of purpose-driven companies and previously served as entrepreneur in residence at Dell Technologies and served at the UN Foundation for nearly a decade as the first ever entrepreneur in residence. So please join me in welcoming all of our speakers to the stage.
All right, howdy everyone. Are we awake? We were just talking about who's hungover, who's not, who's caffeinated, who's caffeinated and motivated. You can raise your hand. Nice. Are you hungover? Anyone? Anyone? Nice. Brave people in the back. Love it. Well, it's great to be with y'all. Bold solutions for a changing world. Are we ready? Can we do this?
Ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I love bold solutions, even the ones that work and the ones that don't, right? And so I'm really excited right now to welcome Jenny Abramson, who I have had the pleasure to learn from, watch, and see her grow, not just her own venture capital firm, but thousands of entrepreneurs, particularly women and people of color, at Rethink Impact. And I'm going to ask her to talk a little bit about that. So welcome, Jenny. And then Lindsay Jurist-Rosner. So glad to have you here as well. We were just talking about, and we're going to learn a lot about what it truly means to be wealthy in a few minutes. But she is the CEO of Wealthy, based in New York City. Jenny, I should have said you're Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Wild and woolly there today. But please join me in welcoming both Lindsay and Jenny. Let's give a round of applause to pump them up today.
Thank you.
So Jenny, I want to start with you and your philosophy behind Rethink Impact. And one of the things that I really like talking about is how investing in women means you're a true capitalist, by the way, and you want to make a lot of money. So talk to us about it.
Sure. Money. It's one of my favorite topics. So really good to be here with you. Thank you so much. I was actually a tech CEO. I was often the only woman on a given stage or in a given room. And as a good data nerd out of Stanford, I looked up the numbers and saw that less than 3% of venture capital dollars were going to women. My own mom had actually started the first ever venture capital fund investing in women more than 20 years earlier. And the percentage of dollars that went to women when she did it in the mid-90s was higher. And that just sort of shocked me. And what was really shocking is when you look up the data on investing in diverse entrepreneurs, women, people of color, companies led by diverse entrepreneurs perform better, significantly better. Companies led by women exit faster, on average a year faster, and as we all know, time is money. And there was so much data around this that I started realizing that this wasn't just a good for the world type of moment. This was something that was a financial opportunity. And so I started what is now the largest venture capital fund in the country, investing in female entrepreneurs, all trying to make a difference in various ways we can talk about.
Which means you're a true capitalist.
True capitalist.
I love it. Your mom, is your mom work with you at all now?
She doesn't. Unfortunately, she passed, but she was around when I started it, and she, I think, was both depressed that it
still
happen, but also really energized that we were finally doing it at a scale where things were starting to change. So
is there a piece of advice you keep with you from her as you do this? We're just going super deep really fast. We're going to Oprah for a second.
No. I think she always sort of was a believer in make it happen. Mm-hmm. If you want to make change, don't wait for someone else to make it happen.
Wow.
And find great talent, and we can talk about that later, and make it happen. So I think as I have 2 daughters, and I think about what do I want when they're hopefully sitting here, it's not that they're sitting there saying, whoa, there's this huge gap for women and people of color. They're saying, yeah, of course, women get at least 50% of venture dollars because it's a huge opportunity.
Right. What a beautiful generational story, by the way. That's amazing. Lindsay, Tell us about your inspiration when you started Wealthy.
Yeah, sure. So, connection to my mom as well. You know, Wealthy was born out of a personal experience that I had for almost my entire life. My mom got diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, MS, if you know that condition, and I was her caregiver, which meant after college I moved home and lived at home. I would get my mom up in the morning and help her on and off the toilet, help her with breakfast, and then go into the office, come home throughout the day to help her, and then help her in the evenings. And I did that for years until I reached a point of burnout in my late 20s, and I moved out and took care of her from afar and set up support and infrastructure for her, and went through hospitalizations, surgeries, and then the last year and a half of her life she was on hospice. And it was through that experience with my mom, which was, by the way, the hardest thing ever. Stressful, lonely, you know, all the things. And it was my realization that my situation was far from unique. You know, it's a massive issue. It's a massive women's issue still, and it's impacting, you know, people in the workforce especially. And so I got very inspired to solve this very personal problem and to make a better healthcare experience for families like mine.
And how are you two connected?
So it goes back to capitalism. We invest in what we think are the best solutions for the bold, you know, big problems in a changing world. And we do it in 4 main areas: healthcare, education, environmental sustainability, and workforce mobility. And our companies we invest in, we go in really early, and they're often multi-billion-dollar companies. And Lindsay's a great example of a company where we found a CEO we thought was fabulous. I think you all would agree, based on our time today. And where we thought this wasn't just a problem, this was a huge opportunity that had been missed, a huge business opportunity. And so we invested and led their Series B along with a number of great investors.
And I'll share from my perspective. You know, when we started Wealthy, I would walk into rooms of men. You know, venture capital is a very male-dominated industry, and explaining this problem that more so impacts women, it somewhat fell on deaf ears. I mean, we have phenomenal male investors, but for the most part, you know, it wasn't necessarily a problem and a solution that a typical male VC could resonate with. And so what was so powerful in meeting Jenny and Rethink Impact is their orientation, and Jenny being a woman, just the orientation's really different, the connection's different, and then the power of the platform and the network and to be part of the community has just been game-changing for us.
And go ahead, please.
No.
I wanted to ask you, Lindsay, a lot of people think of the care economy and they go straight to thinking of childcare solutions and other things, and you have major enterprise customers. And I wanted to understand just the business model. I think everyone in this room can learn a lot from that.
And I'll back up for a second and explain the care economy, because I think it's really important.
Thank you.
So first of all, the care economy is valued at $6 trillion, right? 6x the value of the pharmaceutical industry. It's a massive economy. And yet, we don't really talk about it, but yet it impacts every single one of us. So the care economy is, for the most part, made up of paid caregivers, people who go into homes, work in daycare facilities, long-term care facilities, and unpaid caregivers, people who look like all of us and have parents, children, spouse, sibling, someone who they're taking care of, or your own care needs. Paid caregivers, there are a shortage currently. Through the pandemic, we saw a massive amount of people step out of the workforce in those paid caregiving roles. The result is that unpaid caregivers are having to leave their careers to be able to provide care for their loved ones. You know, thankfully, people live for really long periods of time now, thanks to modern medicine, but that places a burden on someone to take care of aging adults especially. And so the impact is on the workforce. We're seeing people stepping out of jobs, taking leaves of absence, experiencing lost productivity, and major companies have started to recognize that it's a large issue for their workforce. You know, we're facing a labor shortage in our country, and we can get more people into roles if we provide care infrastructure, childcare, senior care, long-term care. And so our clients include Accenture, Google, it's Meta, it's all sort of the major employers in the country right now that have identified this issue as something they need to solve for their workforce.
And I'll just add to that, when we were analyzing the business and we were looking at Wealthy, we would call these companies, right? We'd call the head of HR and we'd say, what happens in a downturn, right? Do you take away a benefit like Wealthy? And they would say, one, we couldn't, there would be mutiny. And two, it actually would be a horrible financial decision for us, because for every employee of ours that uses Wealthy, right, which is probably 40% of all caregiving employees in a company, 1/3 of them report that they've actually avoided a leave of absence or avoided quitting altogether because they use Wealthy. And so the ROI on a business like that, that makes it more than a benefit. That's an infrastructure play in the company. And so that to us is what made it compelling. Similarly, we have a business, Spring Health, that deals with mental health care in employers. Dealing with mental health challenges is not just a nice to have. That's something that you have to do if you want to be a business. We have a company, Candidly, that deals with student debt crisis. We feel like these businesses understand now that if you want your workforce to be focused and be there and not leave, you have to have that infrastructure.
I want to unpack what you said about, is this going to scale? And particularly, and you said particularly in a down economy. We are in 2023, the ambiguity is palpable right now. One minute we hear that we're not going to have a recession, the next we are. As a venture capitalist, how are you assessing if you're going to invest in a business, if they can make it through this ambiguity?
I mean, one thing we do is look at the leaders themselves. There's probably three things. One is we look at the leaders, which is you can tell when you talk to a leader whether they are someone based on their experience, based on what they've done. Are they someone who's going to be able to adjust to whatever the business calls for? I think the second is companies, the customers. We tend to invest in businesses that sell to other businesses. When you talk to a business leaders, you can actually unpack whether the ROI is there to make it something that even in a downturn would be a bad business decision to leave. And then the third is, do they have a tech moat? Do they have some tech differentiator that allows them, one, to actually stay ahead and be the leader, the definer of that category? And I think Wealthy is a great example of sort of the category creator in caregiving, and sort of the category king or queen, as we like to say. And two is, do they actually have a tech that allows them to scale efficiently in terms of margins on the business?
I want to switch gears. I asked Lindsay earlier, and I think she has a lot of wisdom to share with y'all. And I said, what is the difference between being rich and wealthy? Because I love the name of the company. And explain your philosophy behind that.
So Wealthy, the name of our company, is spelled Wellthy. So obviously a play on the word wealthy. And we just believe that health is wealth. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have health and if you don't have some basic care, you have nothing. And so that's really the premise. We feel strongly at Wealthy that everybody deserves care infrastructure, deserves quality care, deserves, that right and that choice. And so that's what we provide.
And you said earlier something that really struck me is you can have all the money in the world, but if someone you love is having a health issue, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, what's the care you're going to give them? And we all have children, and I think we're in an interesting time when we have our children we're caring for, we have aging parents we're caring for, and nothing slapped us in the face more than COVID during that. Yeah. And I'm just curious, things you mentioned, if you're going to cut an HR benefit or not. Coming out of COVID, what did we learn as it relates to investments in things like Wealthy that corporations are now taking on that they would not have previously taken on?
So we learned two things during COVID. One relates to investments in companies like Wealthy, and one relates to investments in diverse entrepreneurs. I think as it relates to investments in companies like Wealthy and Spring and Candidly and Icon and so many others, is we have learned that businesses now understand more than ever that there was this silent crisis happening. And whether it's mental health or it's caregiving or otherwise, people are no longer willing to be silent, and they can't, because it was right there. It was right on the Zoom screen. So I think we learned that, and I think it means these businesses aren't just going to survive, they're going to thrive in this economy. I think the other thing we learned, which is more challenging, is that the investment dollars in women and entrepreneurs of color went down. So they had been up at the highest levels in history as a percentage, and then they just dropped. And I think what happened is people reverted back into investing in people they knew, people they were comfortable with, not meeting new people. So it's great that 100,000 people are here with us today because it's CES, because
make sure to meet each other.
That is how investments in diverse entrepreneurship happens. And so even though the data is there that I shared on returns on investment, there is still work to do to get the numbers back up, and the same has happened with the downturn.
Do you see that, though, as we can say problem, opportunity, probertunity, I don't know, but you're stepping, I look at you and say, that is so smart, because even if it's only 2 to 3%, that is a 97% opportunity for very successful entrepreneurs that other people, for whatever reason, aren't backing. But do you see it as a massive opportunity, too?
It is a massive opportunity. People often will say to me, well, you invest in entrepreneurs that are diverse and impact, how do you have enough deals to do? And I laugh, because we probably get 1,000 deals coming our way every year, of which we, like at most venture firms, need to pick 4 to 5 to invest in. That's a massive opportunity. Right. So we've been lucky. We've backed by everyone from Melinda Gates to the Kellogg Foundation to so many other incredible investors who thankfully see this not just as good for the world, but as a business opportunity.
And Lizzie, are you optimistic? I mean, what does the next year look like for your business?
Yeah, a couple things, and Jenny just made me think of this. I mean, it's a tough capital market. It's, tougher for any startup or entrepreneur to raise in this environment. But to Jenny's point, that's always been the case for women, right? So, okay, same old.
Whoopee, it's hard, really?
Oh, yeah, okay. We weren't getting the dollars before, and so I'm not sure that changes. But no, I mean, in the business environment, it's been really interesting. We have some really supportive and champion and bullish clients who have really embraced supporting care, and that is a real business driver. And so, I had a conversation recently with Corey Berry, who's CEO of Best Buy, and they're a client of ours, and I asked Corey, what would it, if there's a downturn and you have to make cuts, whatever that looks like, how would you think about Wealthy in that scenario? And she said, Wealthy's ROI is so significant. It is infrastructure for our team. If we have to cut costs, we'll have to reinvest in our current team to make sure we retain the talent that we need to retain. And so I think that's the theme, for companies and industries that are doing layoffs. We're not seeing those companies cut benefits and support like Wealthy. We've been through multiple renewals over the last couple of months for companies that are in the news making layoffs, and they've renewed with us because they want to reinvest in that team that they're retaining. The other trend we're seeing is there are a whole bunch of industries that are experiencing labor shortages. You look at healthcare, retail, hospitality, travel. These are industries that can't hire fast enough, can't find enough people to hire. And those industries, companies like Hilton and Best Buy, as I mentioned, are saying if we provide care infrastructure for our employees, allow them to set up the right in-home care, find the right daycare, find the right senior care facility for mom or dad, that can get more workers back into the workforce, which reduces their turnover, call-outs, as they're called, and provides better work experience. And so we're really bullish on 2023 and what it means for our business.
That should give us all optimism. I don't like waiting till the end to offer up folks to ask questions, because I think it gets everyone on new topics. So if you do have a question, there's a microphone right here, and I think there's one on the other side. So you can step up, and I will call on you as you come forward. So I want to switch. We've talked a lot about the care economy. What other categories in what industry or investment are you fired up about in the next year? Or I would say 24 months even.
Don't get me started. There's a lot I'm
Notes.
excited about.
She knows
now.
what she's talking about. Take notes.
I think one is environmental sustainability. Obviously, the IRA and massive tailwinds out of the government make that a really interesting space. And I think we all have to only turn on the news to realize the crisis that's happening in our environment. So we see really big opportunities, especially in businesses that measure environmental quality and air quality, water quality, et cetera, and we've invested there. I'd say a second one is student debt. If you've followed the news at all, this administration has obviously been doing a lot during COVID and now most recently around bills that allow employers to, in some ways, treat student debt the way you would of retirement payments. So allow employees to actually get money into their 401ks, whereas before, if they were paying down debt and they couldn't contribute, which was hugely problematic in terms of economic discrimination in some ways. So businesses like Candidly that allow us to take the student debt space and turn it on its head for people. I continue to think mental health is going to be a growth area. And frankly, and this relates to this panel and today, the future of work. Everything that relates to how we work, I think, is never going to be as it was 5 years ago. And so this is a moment where investments that can change how we work, that make it easier for people to work from home, to do things, I think is a big opportunity area.
And what's your perspective outside of your own industry? What are other industries as an entrepreneur that you're keeping your eye on?
Well, I'll second what Jenny just said. The future of work related to kind of where we spend time is really fascinating for the same reasons that Jenny just said. You know, I think in this environment, we talk a lot about AI and how that's going to disrupt workforces and automation. But to Jenny's point, they're just the kind of post-COVID forces where, you know, we hear it every day from our workforce that they want to only work remote, you know, when we hire people. And that's the trend of the future. And there are just some jobs that can't be remote. So I think that's going to be the big thing for us to figure out over the next couple of years. So future of work, I'll second that point.
I want to switch to just both of you as leaders, as individuals and leaders. We've got on Hello Alice about 1.5 million small business owners, you know, the stores that you all walk into every single day. And what I'm hearing is that, you know, entrepreneurs do really well in opportunity times and really well in extreme crisis. I mean, COVID, they knew they had to buckle down and figure it out. But we talked about earlier the uncertainty of this year and ambiguity. And it seems like a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs are, in terms of mental health, just struggling a little bit to find the direction they're heading. Am I going to do layoffs? Am I not? Or is this going to be a good year? What is your counsel, your advice, both of you as an investor and an entrepreneur, for entrepreneurs in the audience heading into this year of uncertainty and ambiguity?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're learning through it, right? We're kind of in the trenches right now, figuring it out. One of the things we've seen in our business is, you know, staying just really kind of disciplined. You know, when everything's up and to the right, you know, there's capital flowing, and then you're wanting to invest in growth, and you know, maybe hire on certain teams ahead of the need. In kind of a tighter economic environment, you know, what we're finding on our side is you just have to be a lot more disciplined, a lot more planful, you know, a lot more thoughtful about the business impact of every investment. So every team, every initiative, making sure that that ties to the goals, you know, the ultimate business impact goals of the company. And I think that's a good forcing function for any company. And in boom times, I think sometimes you lose sight of some of those fundamentals. And so it's a good return to some of those just sound, you know, business fundamentals. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, you know, finding those smart strategies. You know, we're in a business environment right now where, you know, we call on companies and HR teams. You know, our team has to be smart. Calling on companies that are experiencing layoffs is just not probably the right strategy. Calling on companies where we can solve a real business need, like hospitals. We're supporting nurses and healthcare workers, and we have a really great story. It's just refining the strategy, tightening the lens, and being really focused in our approach. And then just optimism. I think there's a lot of concern. People worry about layoffs and recession, and the news is doom and gloom. And I work really hard to over-communicate with the team. I send a weekly email. I do calls with new joiners, just making sure people feel connected to the company, connected to the mission, feel like they can ask questions, and don't feel like there's uncertainty or ambiguity or concern about what's to come.
The 2 words I just wanted to repeat back to the audience was discipline and pragmatism. I love that. And what's your advice?
I agree with everything Lindsay said, and she's obviously a great example of doing that. I would say 2 things. One is cash. And obviously, I'm an investor, so I think a lot about cash, but you have a lot of control over your future if you have enough cash. So if that means making cuts, fine. If that means getting the debt line, fine. Really making sure that you can weather the storm so that you can choose who you take money from, who you don't take money from, is very powerful. And I think the second is people. Making sure you're surrounded by the right people on your team. This is a good moment to get rid of people that maybe aren't performing or frankly are bringing down your culture, and have the right people around your cap table, right? You want investors who are there for you in the good times and the bad. And that is more important than ever, is making sure you are aligned with who you have invested in your company. Less probably about any one term or any one moment, and more about you're going to be, one of my entrepreneurs, Sally Krawcheck, who some of you may know runs Ellevest, often jokes that it's harder to get divorced from your investors than a spouse.
Legally, yes, it is very hard.
So you're going to be stuck with these people for a long time. Make sure you're making wise choices in a downturn.
So cash is queen is what I'm going to repeat. So, yes, sir.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
There we go.
Good morning. My name is Sriram Parthasarathy, and my question is more along the lines of elderly care. And I am nearing 50, and I have a lot of people, in my age group, primarily Indians, primarily immigrants, concentrated more towards Bay Area and New Jersey to start with. When we think about care for our parents, they are elderly, and it is difficult for us to take care. And when we look at the options available, we see generic elderly care, but from the cultural background and where we come from, we would like to see some elderly care that caters to the Indian community. Again, I'm giving a specific example. It can be applied to anything. So do you see business opportunity in catering to elderly care for different communities? And are you investing in that? What is your take on it?
Elderly care in different cultures and communities.
Great. Yeah, great question. So definitely. I mean, it's care is so intersectional. You can't decouple care from family finances, from religion, from culture, from race, from socioeconomic inputs. They're all intertwined. And we're seeing really fascinating trends in the U.S. We've seen an increase in multi-generational households over the last decade. So it used to be that 6% of Americans lived in a household with 3 or more generations. Now it's 26% of Americans that live in households with 3 or more generations. And so that's going to be an important consideration, for our company and for any, mental health, any company that's addressing individuals' needs. You have to consider all of these elements. It makes it harder, right? The expectation is we're not only supporting you with care decisions that are right for your family, but they're taking into consideration how you pay, what's culturally appropriate, maybe language, other considerations. Am I answering your question? Maybe not.
You are, but my question, there are 2 ways, right? One, you provide a healthcare worker that comes to my home, helps taking care of my aging parents. That is one. And secondly, you have a center, a old age home that caters to certain communities. So on the first level, are you doing anything? On the second level, are you doing anything? If you're not doing anything, that's okay, but what is your take on both?
Oh, I love the question. Okay, so exactly right. So senior care today in the country is handled by really three main paths. Family members taking care of their family members. So that could be you taking care of an older adult in the home, in their home, or you hire someone to come into the home, a paid caregiver to take care of that loved one, or there's various types of long-term care facilities, memory care, assisted living, other supportive living environments. What Wealthy does is we help families navigate the right solution for them, help vet the different solutions, whether that's a paid caregiver to come into the home, whether that's a supportive living environment, helping families access financial aid to be able to pay for care. You know, you can access care through Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, long-term care insurance, but these are very difficult areas to navigate for families who are oftentimes stressed and dealing with other pressures. And so our role in the ecosystem is to really take the side of the family, to be the family's advocate and expert, and help them establish care. What we've built with Wealthy is analogous to the way you might work with a financial advisor, right? That partner who's the expert to help you make those smart decisions, because otherwise families are on their own. Now, there are massive shortages across all of those areas. There's a shortage of paid caregivers. We have long-term care facilities in our country that are experiencing years and decades long wait lists. So the other opportunity for Wealthy is we are helping families gain access to care because we know how to access care. So that's our role in the ecosystem. Where we're going and the future potential is we have tremendous data on not only the gaps, but also the needs that aren't being served in the country today, and making sure we get that data out there so entrepreneurs can build unique solutions in locations that there are shortages.
Do you have an addition to that?
Well, I guess what I would just say is I think this will be the women's equality issue for at least the next decade, if not longer. So when we think about past issues that were 2/3 of caregivers are women. And so if we don't figure this out in an efficient way, women will not advance in the boardroom. Women will not advance in the C-suite. So all these things we read on this.
Politics and anything, yeah.
All the things we read won't happen if we don't solve this.
Well, Jenny, we're going to keep going back to capitalism. I know you have a very scientific way that you assess scalability, but let's do a quick poll the audience. Let's just see how scalable the care economy is. So if anyone in this room manages some type of childcare, or you have children that you hire childcare, just raise your hand. Okay, keep it up. Does anyone in this room manage or support any kind of elder care? Your parents, an auntie, an uncle? Okay, so that's 2/3 of the room that right now has some need for what you're building. So if that's not a reason to invest in the care economy, there we go. Yes, sir, from Michigan.
Yeah, go blue.
Hey there.
My name is Blake. I help. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
Absolutely.
Cool. We help diverse entrepreneurs and founders just learn about venture capital, and we teach them just the basics and the fundamentals. My question for you is, what's the best $1,000 you've ever spent?
It was not the slots machines last night. I can tell you that. No,
Say,
go for
I
it.
have a picture I tweeted at Abramson Jenny of me in the slot machines, and it basically told me to keep my day job. So, probably shouldn't say that on stage. No. Do you have your best $1,000?
Best $1,000. So I wanted to found Wealthy in 2009. Years before we actually started the company. It was like in me, I was passionate about it, I was obsessed. It was a problem, but I didn't get up the nerve to solve Wealthy. But instead, I thought about, like, if I were to start this company, what would I call it? You know, what might it look like? You know, that was like my fun thing to do. And so in having some fun and thinking about what I would call the company, I came up with Wealthy, and I went online and found out that wealthy.com was available. And so I bought it for $1,000. Personal money, that was like a big expense.
Back
2009, I bought
way.
wealthy.com. I have since had so many offers to buy the domain name and by the way, I reached out to an expert on domain names to say, like, is this a waste of money? And he was like, no, one word, .com, slight misspelling of a common name, very good value. So I thought, okay, even if I don't start wealthy.com will have some value. So it's an investment. So that's the best investment.
That is awesome, by the way. That is such a cool story. So go out and buy. Yes, give her applause. That's vision, right? That is vision. So go out right now and buy domains and then stick to it. What's your best $1,000?
I don't have anything that tops that. I was thinking about, I was randomly in London after I graduated on a Fulbright doing the nerdiest topic ever, human genomics of all things. And I was totally disconnected from the world. And I went into a subway or whatever the tube stations there and made myself business cards because people would be like, you're doing what? In what topic? And having these cards, which I realize now would have to be a QR code, to give to people somehow made everything more credible. And I was, 21 years old, knew nothing. And I started getting these meetings with people who owned castles and people who did all these things. And it taught me a lot about how do you present to the world and how do you ensure that if you have an important thing to get done, you get the right other smart people around you to do it with you. And I think at the end of the day, none of us can do this work by ourselves. It's really about teaming with Lindsay, teaming with you. And so that was my lesson.
Awesome. Great answers. Great. Oh, mine. We had a time before at Hello Alice, before our Series A, where I'll say it now out loud because it was so long ago, that we were out of cash. And so myself and my co-founder, Carolyn, we decided not to pay ourselves for a while. And in the state of California, that is not legal.
I happen to know that.
Yes. So we I had to pay myself minimum wage, and it came out to a little under $1,000. And what I realized by that is no matter what, you have value. I'll never forget that, and having to pay that $1,000 and realizing that, okay, even though we're in the worst spot ever right now, we still have value, and the rest is history. And now successful company, but I'll never forget that $1,000.
Very funny you say that.
Having to pay myself.
Because we find women are so capital efficient, right? And in a big up market, people penalize them for that. In this market, people love them. Yeah. And we've many times had female CEOs where the minute stuff starts to go down, they're like, just don't pay me. Mm-hmm. We get in these battles where we're like, no, we don't just want to pay you. We want you to become incredibly rich. We want you to run $1 billion company plus and have lots of money so you can keep paying this forward. And it's always a very, very challenging conversation.
It's super interesting. So we have 2 minutes left, and I actually want to flip the script and ask you for bold solutions for a changing world, how do you encourage people sitting in this audience to find their bold solution? I'm just curious, what advice as an entrepreneur, we'll start with you, Lindsay, would you give everyone here?
Well, my advice is to do something that you're just so genuinely committed to, passionate about, that's in you, that you feel. I have a dear friend, best friend, who started a belt company, brilliant concept, sort of like a Warby Parker for belts, and she was off to the races and she was doing great work. But she called me about a year in and she said, I'm so sick of belts. And so that sticks with me. Make sure that, years in and, when there are tough times and good times, that you'll still wake up every day energized and committed. And, finding that thing is hard, but if you are passionate about it, then that's the path to success, I think.
Be passionate. I love it. Jenny?
I would agree that best to find something you're passionate about because it is going to suck at some point, no matter what. You are going to run into a roadblock. And so if it's something you care about, it will be much easier. And partner with people who are similarly passionate about it, but who are very different from you. Because at the end of the day, diversity drives better returns. And that's on your own team as well. And so at the end of the day, I would just say, find something you're passionate about, but make sure you do it with other people who are different from you.
Brene Brown always says embrace the suck, but I guess it's important to do it with something you're passionate about. around great people. So will everyone join me in please thanking Jenny from Rethink Impact and Lindsay from Wealthy. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for moderating this.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to CTA for having us.
And thank you, CTA, and y'all have a great CES. Enjoy.
Fun. We'll talk to you on Twitter.